We are back at it again. This is another many interpretations of insert dinosaur or prehistoric animal name here. Now, in terms of Jurassic dinosaurs, probably the one that comes up most frequently would be Allosaurus. That dinosaur is incredibly popular. I mean, you can see it everywhere in pop culture. Oftentimes, I'm sure you'll hear people call it a T-Rex because this is a fun world that we live in. But yes, that means that it does show up very frequently in media, and that means that this video is probably going to be quite a bit longer than some of my other many interpretation of videos. So I'll try to keep my kind of thoughts on the different designs to as much of a minimum as I possibly can. But, we'll see how it goes. But there's a lot of really cool things for us to look at for this one. So let's get into it. Okay, so for the first three, we basically need to start off with the beginning. That seems very fitting for a dinosaur like this because it has been showing up in pop culture for a very long time. To my knowledge, since 1925, which, that's almost 100 years ago. That's absolutely insane. Allosaurus has been around for a long time. So for these first three, they basically have the same basic design with them. Those three in question are from The Lost World 1925, 1 million years BC in 1966, and The Valley of Guanji in 1969. These three depictions of Allosaurus are very much a product of their time. This is what we thought that they looked like. It was a very different time for dinosaurs. This was a pre-Renaissance era where we thought, for the most part, dinosaurs were giant lumbering lizards that would drag their tails everywhere that they went. This was before we figured out that a lot more dinosaurs were warm-blooded and were probably a lot quicker than we initially thought. Now, I love looking back and seeing these depictions. Like, I really like watching The Valley of Guanji. Of course, The Lost World is an instant classic and is probably one of the most important dinosaur movies out there. And the stop motion work for these guys is absolutely incredible. Of course, their design or the idea of what Allosaurus looked like differs so much today. Like, this looks a little bit more like T-Rex. Like, at the time, the basic theropod shape was essentially like this. So it is very different to our understanding of it now, but it's still incredibly iconic, and I just love seeing it. I love seeing how much of our idea of these animals has changed over time, and Allosaurus is a shining example of that. But next up is kind of an obscure one, for me anyway. Like, let me know if you know about this, but the next one is Dinosaurs Expedition Born Free, which I think was a series that ran from 1976 to 1977. Its design is certainly interesting and quite a bit different. It has bumpy skin, kind of like noodly limbs, and it's kind of like a middle ground. Like, this is after the dinosaur renaissance had kicked off, but we haven't necessarily moved to a more so a horizontal stance. So I feel like designs were kind of in a little bit of a middle ground, and it feels like that's what this design is. It doesn't have things like the lacrimal crests and things like that, which I will be mentioning a lot because I love the way that the lacrimal crests look on the animal. It's such a cool, unique flair that it has, and I especially love when they stand out on certain designs. So yes, I will be mentioning the crests quite a bit. But moving on from that, we have Dinosaurs, another one that I've never heard of, and it looks interesting. It looks like it's kind of like anthropomorphized dinosaurs that are, much more human-like in appearance. The Allosaurus that showed up in that is interesting. I think his name is Allo, at least that's what I can gather. And he has a family. He has a wife and I think a daughter as well as a maid. And I think he's the villain of this, but I'm not entirely sure. He doesn't have the crests, and he has more so of a brown coloration, as well as like a ship that is, the head of a dinosaur. It looks very interesting. Again, never heard of it before, but it looks interesting. And another one that we have is another one that I've never heard of before, and that's Cadillacs and Dinosaurs. I couldn't even find a lot about this, at least in terms of images on the internet. So I'm assuming that this fella right here is the Allosaurus. At least that's what it looks like to me. It has some fascinating crests, as well as 4 fingers, but I do hope that this does represent the Allosaurus. It does kind of look like an Allosaurus, so fingers crossed that that's what it is. Very unique design, that's for sure. Next, we have Land of the Lost. Now, its design in here is very cool. I really like the shape of it. It's definitely a lot closer to our idea of what Allosaurus is today, although it is covered with osteoderms and things like that, but I do really like the colors that they used for it. Apparently, at least from what I can tell, Land of the Lost is kind of like a an almost remake of a 1974 series of the same name, where this same Allosaurus, whose name is Big Alice, also shows up with a very old design, with a strange face. I don't really know what to say about it. I do think that the remake is definitely a lot closer to Allosaurus. Like with this design, this is like, I know that this isn't what we thought Allosaurus looked like in 1974. This is very interesting. I've never heard of it before, but it's very, very cool. I really like it. Next on our list is the Dinosaur Valley Girls. This looks like an interesting little project. Its Allosaurus design, I think, looks really cool. It has more of a crocodilian-like skin, so of course osteoderms are present on it. I really like the colors, and the crests look really cool. And this is the first one here. It actually has lips. That's a huge plus. It's likely that theropod dinosaurs did have lips, so that's I think for the most part a first. I mean, the old designs had lips, but as far as like when we're getting closer to modern day things, that's kind of a first. I really like this design. It looks very cool. Now we're on to childhood classics, that being Land Before Time, one of the many sequels that released afterwards. Of course, when I'm being a kid and things like that, I couldn't really tell that this was Allosaurus, and that's because its design is very reminiscent to the other theropod dinosaurs that show up, as in it kind of has like more of a thick appearance, a lot more like Tyrannosaurus Rex, as well as no crests. Son of a gun. I've also noticed that sometimes it does have 2 fingers instead of the 3 fingers, but I think sometimes it does have 3 fingers, so I think that's probably chalked up to animation error. Still really cool that Allosaurus did show up in Land Before Time. A lot of our childhood favorite franchises. But now we're on to the classics, that being Walking with Dinosaurs. Its design here is, of course, incredibly iconic. It's quite a bit off to our understanding of Allosaurus today, both in Walking with Dinosaurs, the official show, and the Walking with Dinosaurs special, that being the Big Al special. The design varies a little bit in the Big Al special with the close-up shots, where the skull shape looks a little bit more reminiscent to what we see it as today. But again, this design is incredibly iconic. I really like the crests. I like the red coloring for the crests. It helps it stand out from the rest of the dinosaur. All in all, it does look really cool, and is pretty decent for Allosaurus for its time, but of course is not very close to our understanding of the animal right now. Sticking with documentaries, we have When Dinosaurs Roamed America. This design probably doesn't stick in the mind of very many people because it's just kind of a basic single color for the whole animal. It also doesn't have very prominent crests, and it's very shrink wrapped, very skinny in general. It's definitely a kind of a gnarly design. Like it looks very scary, especially with those teeth exposed the way that they are. Definitely not a design that I think many people will think of when they think of Allosaurus, but it's definitely cool in its own way. After that, we have The Lost World 2001. Now, if I'm not mistaken, the CGI for the dinosaurs in this was done by the same folks who did the CGI for Walking with Dinosaurs, and that's very representative in their Allosaurus design. It's very reminiscent of the Walking with Dinosaurs design, but improved on in a lot of different ways. I really like the patterns, I like the colors, and the skull shape looks fantastic, as well as the crests looking really cool. This is not a project that I've really seen, but from what I can tell, it looks fantastic, and it's just another one of those Lost World projects that I think I definitely need to check out. It's crazy that it's taken me this long, but we're finally talking about Jurassic Fight Club. I'm sure if you've been on the paleo media space of YouTube, you'll know that this documentary is not looked at very fondly of. And that is incredibly fair, because this is a show that prioritizes very cool dinosaur fights over giving you solid information. And that's true anytime Allosaurus shows up. Now, its design isn't really bad. Of course, it's a shrink wrap design, and some of the proportions are kind of weird. It's also breaking its wrists, which by that point is kind of unexcusable, because we've known that they've held their wrists inwards rather than downwards for a long time, especially even by the time that this documentary was released. And as I say, when it comes to documentaries, I get a little bit more particular with that because they're meant to be educational. It's also shown bullying Ceratosaurus, like, incredibly, and like the talking heads of the documentary keep bullying Ceratosaurus too. It's incredibly unfair. I really like Ceratosaurus, if you couldn't tell. But I do like the coloration that they used for it. Again, I really like red lacrimal crests when it comes to Allosaurus. That's one of the first things that comes to mind, and I think it's because of documentaries like this that really kind of push that red coloring. But yeah, It's a decent design in a few different aspects, but of course is lacking in a lot of others. But now we're moving on to Dinosaur Evolution. A lot of people like this documentary. I really like this documentary too. I like its kind of emphasis on storytelling. Now, sometimes the animals will get anthropomorphized more than anything, but we do get to follow this fellow right here, which is the European species of Allosaurus. And its name is Broken Jaw, and it's based off of a real-life specimen of an Allosaurus with a broken jaw. Although the specimen with the broken jaw is the North American species, Fragilis. Still, I digress. The fact that it's based off of real fossil material is extremely cool, and I like the story that we get to follow with it, especially with the top predator being Torvosaurus, a dinosaur we don't see too frequently in media. But I also really like the colors used on this guy. I like the crests that are present. It's interesting that it has kind of like spikes on its back. Not really something that's rooted in any paleontological accuracy, but it's certainly a different design flair, all things considered. All in all, I mostly like the story that's used for this, kind of giving him a broken jaw and letting it stand apart from many other theropod dinosaur depictions. Next up is Planet Dinosaur. I really like this documentary as when I was a lot younger. I really like their Allosaurus depiction. I like the shape of it. I like the colors. I really like the patterns that was used for it, and I really like the crests. Now, one thing I will bring up is that they do showcase the kind of hatchet style of hunting, something that is not plausible for the animal. We definitely don't think that it used its jaw like a hatchet where it would kind of just slam down. That's just incredibly impractical for the animal to do. But it's showcased pretty heavily in this documentary. But that aside, the design looks really cool and is one of the designs that I think of when I think of Allosaurus. I will also mention that Saurophaganax shows up in this documentary. Now, there is a little bit of a debate on whether or not Saurophaganax is its own genus or is simply another species of Allosaurus, that being A. maximus. I figured it'd be worth mentioning. Its design is relatively the same to the Allosaurus in the documentary, just with different coloration. I don't know if Saurophaganax is its own genus or if it's just another species of Allosaurus. I just figured that I'd go ahead and mention it here just to be on the safe side. You never know what would happen in the next few years. But now we're hitting the big ones, that being Jurassic World. There are two designs for Allosaurus in the Jurassic World movies. There is the Fallen Kingdom Allosaurus, which had more so of a smooth skin texture, as well as kind of like just a slender build in general. And later it was explained that this was a younger Allosaurus, I believe, and we get to see the older Allosaurus first in battle at Big Rock. I really like it here. It has the correct facing hands. It's of course covered in osteoderms, which is something that newer Jurassic World films are doing. They're just place as many osteoderms as you can on our theropods. That's what they're doing essentially. But I do really like it in the short film. I like seeing it in the lower light levels. I like the way that it was utilized overall, and its whole shape I think looks really cool. I do think that it looks really cool in Battle at Big Rock. That design is also of course carried over in Dominion, and same thing basically. I do think it looks better in lower light conditions, like when it's seen out in the light and you can really see all of the design choices. Then it kind of drops a little bit for me. But for the most part, I do think it's a very cool design. And now Life on Our Planet. This is a recent documentary and it has Allosaurus. If you've watched my Life on Our Planet review, you'll know that I don't like this design, and that's because it basically looks like the Jurassic World Allosaurus, complete with the osteoderms. And especially with a modern day documentary, and after we've been spoiled with Prehistoric Planet and their attention to accuracy, this isn't a very good design, and it's not really one I gravitate towards. Of course, it has the correct facing arms, as well as lips, oral tissue covering its teeth, but for the most part, this is not a design I like. I'm sure it does have its fans, but I'm not a fan of it. I'm not one of them. I'm just not one of them. I'm sorry. I am not wearing a different shirt. You are wearing a different shirt. I also definitely didn't forget to talk about these next two ones and just decided to record it afterwards and put it in. I didn't do that. But we also have Dinosaur King. Now, I should also mention that Dinosaur King did start off as an arcade game before being adapted into the anime series that many of us experienced in our childhood. Of course, Allosaurus did show up both in the arcade game and in the show, and its design is pretty consistent across the board with those. Its design is also pretty reminiscent of what Allosaurus typically looked like back then. It's, of course, in Dinosaur King fashion, it's shrink wrapped, but it does have really cool colors with, of course, red crests that definitely pop. You know, once again, red crests are something that I feel are common for Allosaurus depictions. And then we also have Dinosaur with Stephen Fry. Now, this is a very recent documentary and one that got talked about to death, basically. Insert, this documentary was not good dialogue here. I can pretty much go on and on about how much this documentary failed as a documentary, but we're here to talk about the Allosaurus design, and man, is it shrink wrapped. It's a very interesting design. It has very interesting animations. I will also point out that it's the return of the hatchet hunting method for Allosaurus, and as I mentioned earlier in the video, that's not something that really makes a lot of sense. It's incredibly impractical for the animal. If it tries to do the whole hatchet thing, it'll hit its lower jaw. Doesn't make a lot of sense. But no, the hatchet thing is not something that we really consider. It's been a long time since that has been, you know, even thought about for Allosaurus. But yeah, definitely one of the pretty low on the list when it comes to Allosaurus designs, that is for certain. Okay, now we'll go ahead and transition over to video games. And I think I'm making pretty good time with this. I feel like I'm getting like my basic thoughts of these designs out without kind of like rambling on. Or maybe I have rambled on a little bit too much. If I have, I'm sorry. But we'll start off with the Isle, and man, it looks so cool in the Isle. I don't know if it's in Evrima yet, or if it's been announced for Evrima. I haven't found anything on it. I could be incredibly blind, but I know that it was in Legacy, and I love it in Legacy. I think its design looks so cool. I love the arms, I love the crest, I love its shape, I love the skin texture, and I really like the animations, and I just think it was so cool in the Isle. The Isle typically does have very cool designs that I really like to see, but I think that the Allosaurus is really up there in terms of Isle designs. I just think it looks so good in the Isle. Now we're back to the Jurassic World franchise with Jurassic World the game. Now they have a very unique Allosaurus design in this game. It's different. That's for sure. And if you told me it was an Allosaurus, or if you didn't tell me it was an Allosaurus, I probably wouldn't have guessed. It's very blocky, especially in the head. It has 2 claws instead of 3, you know, much like a Tyrannosaurid. The initial level is, you know, it's fine. It's, of course, the bland kind of gray color. But, you know, as you level up, you get more patterns and coloration, as well as the level 40, which is interesting. You know, it's kind of covered in spikes or feathers. I'm not too sure. Probably spikes. It's definitely different, and it stands out a lot more at level 40. It's certainly a unique design. I'll definitely give it that. After that, we have a game that I play a lot, that being Path of Titans. They also have a very cool design in here. I will point this out because people often do point it out. It is bigger than Allosaurus was in life. It's closer to Saurophaganax in size, which, if Saurophaganax is another species of Allosaurus, then cool. If not, then not really though. It's a game, so it's not necessarily needing to adhere to things like that. Its design here is really cool. I really like the different patterns you can give it. I really like the crests. I really like its shape. Path of Titans typically has really good designs, and this is another one of those designs that I find really good. Now we have Ark, which is very famous for exaggerating a lot of different features on their dinosaurs. In terms of Allosaurus, I don't think there was really too many unique features that they could have exaggerated. I mean, the crests are a little bit bigger, but they did give it what looks like osteoderms, like really huge kind of plated osteoderms, which is very unique. I also really like the head shape, but there's pretty much not much else I can say about it. It's a very cool design for what Ark goes for. You guys aren't going to believe this, but I'm finally mentioning Fossil Fighters. Now, I never played Fossil Fighters, and that's one of the reasons why it's never really shown up on my radar. But of course, I missed the Spinosaurus, and I think the Carcharodontosaurus from Fossil Fighters, so I'm making sure that I'm mentioning the Allosaurus from Fossil Fighters. Of course, it's very stylized. I really like its design. I like the crests that are used, and I like the blue. The blue is not a color that we've seen associated with Allosaurus too much yet, I think it looks really cool on it. Very stylized, once again. Very cool in its own little way. Now on to Jurassic Park Operation Genesis, which usually does a very good job at distinguishing its theropod dinosaurs, and that's true for Allosaurus. It kind of has a posture that's different to most of the theropods in this game. The kind of red coloration. It's very Jurassic Parkified. Like, it certainly fits that style. It looks really cool for what the game is going for. And the crests are definitely interesting. They kind of go a little bit more horizontal rather than vertical, like what we typically see for the animal. All in all, pretty cool design. You know, sometimes I kind of just sit here and I think to myself, man, we once had Jurassic Park Builder, and now we don't. Jurassic Park Builder, if you don't know, was an old park builder game. It was an app, basically, or a little computer game where you get to build your own park. And it had a plethora of different dinosaurs. One of those, of course, being Allosaurus. It's a different design. It's very different, unique. The crests definitely look a lot more like horns, but I think that's mainly just kind of like the graphics, the way that the graphics looked. Not much else to say about it other than the fact that I missed this game. I wish it was still up and that I can return to my middle school park. Then everything would be complete. And finally, we've made it to the end. We have made it to Carnivores Dinosaur Hunter. Now, the Carnivores designs are extremely stylized. Of course, these dinosaurs are meant to be aliens on the planet of FMMUV32. And their design is a lot more representative to old depictions of dinosaurs. Now, the Allosaurus is very interesting because it has more so a dromaeosaur appearance. In fact, when I first played the game and I just kind of came across one diegetically, like, you know, I hadn't unlocked it yet. I just came across it. I thought it was some type of like Utah raptor or, you know, maybe their version of Velociraptor. But turns out it's Allosaurus. And because of that, it has a very unique appearance that definitely stands out compared to most other, you know, designs for this theropod dinosaur. It certainly fits the... Wow. It certainly fits the style of this little gaming universe and is one that I really like. You know, like, never change. Carnivores Dinosaur Hunter Allosaurus, never change. But that's it. That is the majority of the Allosaurus designs that I was able to find. I'm sure I missed some. I always do. This is the vast majority of them. This is probably the longest video that I've done for this little series. What are you gonna do about it? This is a dinosaur that has been showing up for almost 100 years in media. So of course I was very well prepared to see it a lot. But it's a dinosaur whose design I feel is kind of consistently cool. Like, most of the times when it appears, it has a really cool appearance. Now, of course, some of those designs were amiss in my opinion and not really ones that I gravitate towards, especially some of them that were used in a documentary setting. But for the most part, I really do like the consistency of the Allosaurus designs in media. I will probably be putting up another poll for you guys to vote for which one we do next. That's something that I'm kind of leaning towards with this series. I'm letting everyone vote for the next dinosaur. Of course, I'm going to continue to keep the losers in the next poll. That way they equally have a fair shot of being featured in the next video. But that poll will probably be up either, you know, whenever I upload this video. I don't know when I'm uploading this video yet, but probably the next day after the video's been uploaded, or if not, the day after the next day, you know, 2 days after that. So be looking out for that. Be sure to vote for whichever dinosaur or prehistoric animal you wish to see next. That's pretty much all I have for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have an awesome day.